94% of people are destroying their day before they even get out of bed. And here's the part that should disturb you. They have no idea they're doing it. Right now, somewhere in America, an alarm is going off. And the person hearing it is about to make a decision that will shape the next 16 hours of their life. Most of them will make the wrong choice. They'll hit snooze. They'll grab their phone. They'll scroll through notifications while their brain is still half asleep. And just like that, their day is hijacked before their feet even touch the floor. But you're different. You're listening to this. And in the next 11 minutes, you're going to learn something that Harvard neuroscientists have been studying for over 2 decades. Something that changes everything you thought you knew about mornings, motivation, and what it actually takes to become unstoppable. Let me start by destroying a myth. The myth that's been sold to you by every productivity guru, every motivational speaker, every self-help book on the shelf. The myth goes like this: successful people are morning people. They wake up at 5 a.m. They have 2-hour routines. They meditate, journal, exercise, and plan their day, all before sunrise. It sounds inspiring. It looks good on Instagram. And for 97% of people, it's completely unsustainable. Here's what the research actually shows. A 2023 study from the University of Pennsylvania tracked over 12,000 professionals for 18 months. They found that people who attempted elaborate morning routines, the 60 to 90-minute versions, had a failure rate of 89% within the first 3 weeks. 89%. That's not a routine. That's a recipe for guilt. But here's where it gets interesting. The same study found a small group, just 11%, who maintained their morning practices consistently for the entire 18 months. What was different about them? Their routines averaged just 8 to 12 minutes. Not an hour. Not even 30 minutes. 8 to 12 minutes. The researchers called it the sustainability threshold. Beyond 12 minutes, compliance drops dramatically. Below 8 minutes, impact becomes negligible. But in that sweet spot, that 10-minute zone, something remarkable happens. Habit formation accelerates. Consistency compounds. And results multiply. This is the first thing you need to understand. You don't need more time in the morning. You need a better system for the time you have. Now, let me tell you about the second lie. The lie about motivation. Average people wake up and ask themselves a question. It sounds innocent enough. They ask, how do I feel? And based on the answer, they decide how their morning will go. If they feel tired, they hit snooze. If they feel unmotivated, they scroll their phone. If they feel overwhelmed, they skip the gym. Every single morning becomes a negotiation with their emotions. Elite performers operate completely differently. They don't ask how they feel. They don't negotiate with their emotions. They activate a system. The alarm goes off, and the system takes over. There's no decision to make. There's no willpower required. The sequence begins automatically because they've designed it that way. Stanford psychologist B.J. Fogg spent 15 years studying behavior change. His conclusion was revolutionary. Motivation is not a reliable driver of behavior. Systems are. When you have a system, you don't need to feel motivated. You just need to start. And once you start, momentum takes over. Here's how this applies to your morning. Right now, you probably have what I call an accidental morning routine. You didn't design it. It just happened. The alarm goes off. You hit snooze, maybe twice, maybe 5 times. Eventually, you drag yourself out of bed. You grab your phone. You check emails, notifications, social media. You shower, dress, maybe grab coffee. You rush out the door feeling behind before the day has even begun. Sound familiar? You're not alone. A 2024 survey by the American Psychological Association found that 73% of American adults describe their typical morning as rushed or chaotic. 61% say they feel behind schedule before they even arrive at work. And 47% report that their morning mood negatively affects their productivity for the rest of the day. This is the hidden cost of an accidental morning. It's not just about the time you lose. It's about the psychological state you create. When you start your day in reactive mode, responding to alarms, notifications, and external demands, you train your brain to stay in reactive mode. You become a responder instead of a creator, a follower instead of a leader. a victim of your day instead of the architect of it. But there's another way, and it starts with understanding something crucial about your brain. Between the moment you wake up and the moment you're fully conscious, there's a window. Neuroscientists call it the hypnopompic state. It typically lasts between 90 seconds and 3 minutes. During this window, your brain is transitioning from sleep to wakefulness. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for decision-making and self-control, isn't fully online yet. But your limbic system, the emotional, reactive part, is already active. This is why willpower fails in the morning. You're literally fighting your biology. Your rational brain is still booting up while your emotional brain is already making decisions. Hit snooze. That's your limbic system talking. Grab your phone. Limbic system again. Every choice you make in that window is driven by emotion, not logic. Elite performers know this. So instead of fighting their biology, they work with it. They pre-decide their morning the night before. They remove friction from positive behaviors. They add friction to negative ones. And they create environmental triggers that bypass the need for willpower entirely. Let me give you a concrete example. Research from Duke University found that placing your alarm clock across the room, so you have to physically get up to turn it off, increases the likelihood of staying awake by 340%. That's not about motivation. That's about system design. You're using your environment to make the right choice automatic. Here's another one. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine showed that people who laid out their workout close the night before were 220% more likely to exercise in the morning. Again, not about willpower, about reducing friction, about making the desired behavior the path of least resistance. This is what separates the unstoppable from the stuck. It's not discipline. It's not motivation. It's not waking up earlier or trying harder. It's understanding that your morning is a system, and systems can be designed. They can be optimized. They can be made automatic. The people who win their mornings don't rely on feeling good. They don't wait for inspiration. They've built a machine that runs whether they feel like it or not. And over time, that machine transforms not just their days, but their entire lives. Now I want you to consider something. Every expert tells you what to do in the morning. Meditate, exercise, journal, plan your day, and all of that advice is potentially valuable. But none of it matters if you can't get out of bed. None of it matters if the first thing you do is grab your phone. None of it matters if you're already feeling defeated before you start. That's why this audiobook is different. We're not going to start with the what. We're going to start with the how. How to escape the gravitational pull of your bed. How to break the phone addiction that's hijacking your first waking moments. How to create a sequence so simple, so frictionless, that doing it becomes easier than not doing it. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you something that might disturb you. It's about that device sitting on your nightstand. The one that's probably within arm's reach right now. That smartphone that you think is helping you. It's actually rewiring your brain in ways that make every morning harder. The research is alarming, and most people have no idea it's happening. But here's what nobody tells you about your phone, and about what it's really doing to your brain chemistry in those crucial first minutes of consciousness. That's coming next. Chapter 2, The Digital Trap. Your smartphone is hijacking your brain, and it starts the moment you wake up. Here's a number that should stop you cold: 80%. That's the percentage of Americans who check their phone within the first 10 minutes of waking. Not after breakfast, not after showering, within 10 minutes of opening their eyes. And according to a 2024 study from the University of California, Irvine, the average is actually much worse. Most people reach for their phone within 60 seconds of their alarm going off. 60 seconds. Before their brain is fully awake. Before their eyes have adjusted to the light. Before they've taken a single conscious breath. They're already scrolling. And here's what makes this truly disturbing. Your brain in those first waking minutes is in an extraordinarily vulnerable state. Remember the hypnopompic window I mentioned in the last chapter? That transitional period between sleep and full consciousness? During that window, your brain is operating primarily in alpha and theta wave states. These are the same brainwave patterns associated with meditation, hypnosis, and heightened suggestibility. In other words, your brain is wide open. It's receptive. It's programmable. And the first thing most people do is flood it with notifications, emails, news headlines, and social media feeds. This isn't just a bad habit. This is neurological sabotage. Let me explain what's actually happening in your brain. When you wake up naturally, your body initiates something called the Cortisol Awakening Response, or CR. This is a natural spike in cortisol that occurs within 30 minutes of waking. Despite cortisol's reputation as a stress hormone, this morning spike is actually beneficial. It's your body's way of mobilizing energy, sharpening alertness, and preparing you for the day ahead. But here's what researchers at the University of British Columbia discovered in 2022. When you check your phone immediately upon waking, you artificially amplify and distort this cortisol response. The notifications, the emails, the news, each one triggers a microstress reaction. Instead of a smooth, natural rise in alertness, your brain experiences a chaotic surge of cortisol spikes. The result? You feel wired but not focused, alert but not calm, awake but not energized. And that's just the cortisol problem. The dopamine problem is even worse. Dopamine is your brain's motivation molecule. It's what drives you to pursue goals, complete tasks, and feel satisfied with your achievements. But dopamine isn't just released when you accomplish something. It's primarily released in anticipation of reward, the possibility of something good. That's what triggers the dopamine hit. Now think about what your phone represents. Every notification is a potential reward. Every email could be important news. Every social media refresh might reveal something interesting. Your phone is essentially a slot machine in your pocket, a device engineered by some of the smartest people on the planet to trigger dopamine release as efficiently as possible. When you check your phone first thing in the morning, you're flooding your brain with artificial dopamine hits before you've done anything meaningful. And here's the problem. Dopamine operates on a baseline system. When you spike it artificially, the baseline drops. Your brain recalibrates. Suddenly, the normal activities of your day, work, conversation, creative thinking, feel less rewarding by comparison. A 2023 study published in Nature Human Behavior tracked the dopamine levels and productivity patterns of over 3,000 professionals. The findings were striking. Participants who checked their phones within the first 30 minutes of waking reported 41% lower motivation for work tasks and 28% higher rates of procrastination throughout the day. Not just in the morning, throughout the entire day. The researchers called it dopamine frontloading. By consuming easy dopamine hits first thing in the morning, you essentially borrow motivation from your future self. You feel stimulated in the moment, but you pay for it with diminished drive for the rest of the day. Now, here's where I need to tell you something that the tech industry doesn't want you to know. This isn't an accident. This is by design. Former Google design ethicist Tristan Harris has been sounding the alarm for years. In testimony before Congress and in countless interviews, he's explained how tech companies employ teams of neuroscientists and behavioral psychologists specifically to make their products more addictive. The goal isn't to help you. The goal is to capture your attention, as much of it as possible, as often as possible. And when is your attention most vulnerable? When you first wake up. That's why notifications are designed to accumulate overnight. That's why social media algorithms prioritize content that triggers emotional reactions. That's why your phone lights up with red badges and urgent-sounding alerts. Every element is engineered to exploit the vulnerability of your waking brain. The average person, the one trapped in this system, has no idea it's happening. They think they're just checking their phone. They think it's a neutral action. They don't realize they're handing over the steering wheel of their brain to algorithms designed to hijack their attention. But elite performers understand the game. They know that the first input of the day shapes everything that follows. So they protect those early morning minutes like a sacred asset. They create barriers between themselves and their devices. They refuse to let algorithms dictate the trajectory of their day. Here's the contrast. Average people wake up and immediately react to their phone. Their first thoughts are responses to external stimuli, emails to answer, notifications to clear, news to process. They start their day in reactive mode, and they stay there. Elite performers wake up and create before they consume. Their first thoughts are intentional. They choose what enters their mind. They might review their goals, visualize their day, or simply sit in silence. The phone stays untouched, sometimes for 30 minutes, sometimes for hours. They understand that creation requires a different mental state than consumption, and they refuse to pollute their creative capacity with digital noise. This isn't about being anti-technology. This is about being strategic. It's about recognizing that your phone is a tool, and like any tool, its value depends on how and when you use it. So what's the solution? How do you break free from the digital trap? The answer is simpler than you might expect. It's called the Phone-Free First 30 Protocol, and it's been validated by research from Stanford's Persuasive Technology Lab. Here's how it works. You commit to keeping your phone untouched, not just unused, but physically untouched, for the first 30 minutes after waking. During this window, you do not check messages. You do not scroll social media. You do not look at emails. You do not even glance at the screen. This might sound extreme. It might even trigger anxiety just thinking about it. And that anxiety? That's precisely the point. If the thought of being away from your phone for 30 minutes creates genuine distress, that's diagnostic. It tells you exactly how deep the hooks have gone. The research shows that the first 72 hours of the phone-free First 30 protocol are the hardest. Your brain will resist. You'll experience what psychologists call phantom notifications, the sensation that your phone is buzzing when it isn't. You'll feel urges that border on compulsion. This is normal. This is withdrawal. But by day 4, something shifts. The urges begin to fade. By day 7, most people report feeling a sense of clarity they haven't experienced in years. By day 21, the new pattern is neurologically encoded. Your brain has recalibrated. The artificial need has been replaced by natural presence. And here's what you gain in return. Those 30 minutes become the most valuable of your day. Without the digital noise, your mind can actually think. You can plan. You can prioritize. You can connect with yourself before you connect with the world. You take back the steering wheel. Now, I know what you might be thinking. What about emergencies? What if something urgent happens? What if someone needs to reach me? Here's the truth. In my research interviewing hundreds of high performers, not one of them could recall a genuine emergency that occurred in the first 30 minutes of their morning and required immediate phone access. Not one. The fear of missing something urgent is almost always just that, a fear. And that fear is exactly what keeps you trapped. Let me leave you with this. Your phone is not going anywhere. The emails will still be there at minute 31. The notifications will wait. The world will not collapse because you chose to own your first waking moments instead of giving them away. But your brain chemistry, your dopamine baseline, your capacity for focus, creativity, and sustained motivation, those are shaped in the first minutes of your day. Every single morning, you're either building mental resilience or eroding it. You're either taking control or surrendering it. The digital trap is real, and now you know how it works. You understand the neuroscience. You see the design. You recognize the cost. Now that you understand the trap, let me show you how to escape it and replace it with something far more powerful. In the next chapter, I'm going to introduce you to the 10-minute framework that changes everything. It's called the Unstoppable Morning Protocol. And once you learn it, you'll wonder how you ever started your day any other way. That's coming next. Chapter 3, the 10-minute framework. Forget hour-long routines. The world's top performers use something far simpler, and it takes less than 10 minutes. I need to tell you something that might surprise you. When researchers at the Harvard Business School studied the morning habits of 312 Fortune 500 executives over a 2-year period, they expected to find elaborate routines, hour-long meditation sessions, intense workout regimens, complex journaling practices. What they found instead changed everything we thought we knew about high-performance mornings. The average morning routine among these elite executives? 11 minutes. Not an hour. Not even 30 minutes. 11 minutes of intentional practice before they engaged with the demands of their day. And here's what made this finding even more significant. The executives with the shortest, most focused routines consistently outperformed those with longer, more complex ones. Shorter wasn't just more sustainable. Shorter was more effective. This flies in the face of everything the self-help industry has been selling you. Open any best-selling productivity book, and you'll find detailed morning routines that read like part-time jobs. Wake at 5 a.m. Meditate for 20 minutes. Journal for 15. Exercise for 45. Review your goals. Practice gratitude. Visualize success. Read for 30 minutes. By the time you're done, you've spent 2 hours on your morning routine, and you haven't even started your actual work. For the average person with a job, a family, and real-world responsibilities, this is fantasy. It's not a routine. It's a second career. But here's what those Harvard researchers discovered. The magic isn't in the length of the routine. It's in the sequence. It's in doing the right things in the right order at the right time. When you understand the neuroscience of morning performance, you realize that most of those 2-hour routines are filled with redundancy and diminishing returns. The actual high-impact behaviors can be compressed into a fraction of the time. This is why I developed the Unstoppable Morning Protocol, a 10-minute framework built on neuroscience, behavioral psychology, and real-world testing with thousands of professionals. It's not about doing more in the morning. It's about doing what actually moves the needle. Before I walk you through the framework, I need you to understand why 10 minutes is the magic number. In 2021, researchers at MIT's McGovern Institute for Brain Research conducted a study on habit formation and morning routines. They were trying to answer a simple question: what's the minimum effective dose for a morning routine to produce measurable benefits in focus, mood, and productivity? They tested groups with 5-minute routines, 10-minute routines, 20-minute routines, and 60-minute routines. They tracked cortisol levels, cognitive performance, self-reported mood, and end-of-day productivity metrics. The results were clear. The 5-minute group showed minimal improvement. The 20-minute and 60-minute groups showed significant improvement, but their dropout rates were catastrophic. Within 3 weeks, over 70% had abandoned their routines entirely. But the 10-minute group hit the sweet spot. They showed nearly identical cognitive and mood benefits to the 60-minute group, with a compliance rate above 80% at the 6-month mark. The researchers called 10 minutes the habit sustainability threshold. It's long enough to create genuine neurological change. It's short enough to survive the chaos of real life. It's the Goldilocks zone of morning routines. Now let me introduce you to the 5 steps of the Unstoppable Morning Protocol. Each step is designed to take approximately 2 minutes, though as you'll see, some steps can be compressed even further once they become automatic. The 5 steps are reset, prime, activate, focus, and launch. Let me give you an overview before we dive deep into each one in the coming chapters. Step 1 is reset. This is about resetting your brain chemistry from sleep mode to performance mode. Most people skip this entirely. They go straight from unconscious to reactive. But your brain needs a deliberate transition. The reset phase uses specific techniques to optimize your cortisol awakening response, clear the neurological fog of sleep, and establish a baseline of calm alertness. This isn't about jolting yourself awake with cold water or caffeine. It's about working with your biology, not against it. Step 2 is prime. This is about programming your mind for the day ahead. Remember what I said about the hypnopompic state, that window of heightened suggestibility right after waking? The prime phase leverages that window intentionally. Instead of letting random inputs shape your mental state, you choose what enters your mind first. This involves a specific sequence of mental priming techniques that take less than 2 minutes, but set the psychological trajectory for your entire day. Step 3 is activate. This is about waking up your body, but not in the way you might think. You don't need a 45-minute gym session. You need strategic micro-movement that signals to your nervous system that it's time to perform. The activate phase uses a precise 2-minute movement sequence that triggers endorphin release, increases blood flow to the brain, and shifts your physiology from rest to readiness. It can be done in your bedroom. It requires no equipment, and it works even when you're exhausted. Step 4 is focus. This is about directing your mental energy before the world starts demanding it. The focus phase establishes what I call your first focus target, the single most important task that will make your day successful. Most people start their day scattered, bouncing between emails and notifications and requests. Elite performers start their day with absolute clarity about what matters most. The focus phase takes 90 seconds and gives you a targeting system for your attention. Step 5 is launch. This is about creating momentum that carries through the rest of your day. The launch phase involves a specific first action, what I call the 2-minute win, that generates completion chemistry in your brain. When you complete something early, your brain releases a cocktail of dopamine and serotonin that fuels further action. The launch phase ensures you never start your day feeling behind. You start it feeling ahead. Reset, prime, activate, focus, launch. 5 steps, 10 minutes. A completely transformed relationship with your mornings. Now, I want you to understand how this is different from what most people do. Average people wake up and immediately become reactive. Their first conscious moments are spent responding to alarms, to notifications, to the accumulated demands of overnight emails. They have no reset phase, so their brain chemistry is chaotic. They have no prime phase, so their mental state is determined by whatever random input hits them first. They have no activate phase, so their body stays sluggish. They have no focus phase, so they work on whatever screams loudest. And they have no launch phase, so they never experience early momentum. By contrast, people who follow the unstoppable morning protocol wake up and immediately become intentional. Their first conscious moments are spent creating the optimal brain state, the focused mindset, the energized body, the clear target, the early win. Nothing is left to chance. Nothing is left to mood. The system runs, and the system delivers. Here's a case study that illustrates this perfectly. Jennifer Martinez was a regional sales director at a Fortune 500 technology company when she first implemented the unstoppable morning protocol. Before the protocol, her mornings were chaos. 3 kids, a demanding job, a husband with an equally demanding schedule. She'd given up on morning routines entirely. She'd tried the hour-long versions multiple times and always failed. When I introduced her to the 10-minute framework, she was skeptical. How could 10 minutes make any meaningful difference? Within 2 weeks, she was a convert. Her words, "I can't believe I spent years thinking I needed to wake up at 5 a.m. and meditate for an hour. This 10-minute sequence does more for my focus and energy than any of those elaborate routines ever did. And I actually stick with it." 6 months later, Jennifer had been promoted to vice president. She attributes a significant portion of her performance improvement to those 10 morning minutes. Not because the routine itself was magical, but because it eliminated the mental chaos that had been sabotaging her first hours of work. She started every day clear, focused, and ahead. And that advantage compounded. This is the power of sequence over duration. It's not about how long you spend on your morning. It's about doing the right things in the right order to produce the right neurological state. I want to leave you with something important before we move on. What I've given you in this chapter is the architecture, the overview of the 5-step framework. But the architecture is just the beginning. The power is in the details. Each step has specific techniques, specific timings, specific psychological triggers that make it work. In the next chapter, we're going to go deep on step 1, reset. This is where everything begins. It's also the step that most people get wrong because it's counterintuitive. Most people think waking up is about stimulation, alarms, caffeine, cold showers, jolting yourself into consciousness. The reset phase works differently. And when you understand the neuroscience behind it, you'll never start your morning the old way again. Step 1 is the most counterintuitive and the most powerful. That's coming next. Chapter 4. Reset, rewiring your brain chemistry. In the first 90 seconds of waking, your brain makes a decision that shapes your entire day. And you're probably making the wrong one. Here's something that neuroscientists have known for decades, but the self-help industry has completely ignored. Your brain doesn't just turn on when you wake up. It goes through a precise biochemical sequence, a neurological boot-up process that determines your mental clarity, emotional stability, and cognitive performance for the next 16 hours. Interrupt that sequence, and you pay for it all day long. Optimize it, and you unlock a level of focus and energy that most people never experience. This is what the reset phase is all about. It's not about jolting yourself awake. It's not about forcing alertness through caffeine or cold showers. It's about working with your brain's natural systems to produce the optimal neurological state for high performance. Let me take you inside the neuroscience. When you first open your eyes in the morning, your brain initiates something called the Cortisol Awakening Response. Researchers call it CAR for short. Within the first 30 to 45 minutes of waking, your cortisol levels surge by 50 to 150% above your nighttime baseline. This isn't stress. This is biology. This surge is your body's natural mechanism for transitioning from sleep to wakefulness. A healthy CAR does several crucial things. It mobilizes glucose for brain energy. It enhances hippocampal function for memory and learning. It primes the prefrontal cortex for executive function and decision-making. It sets the foundation for emotional regulation throughout the day. In short, a properly optimized cortisol awakening response is like premium fuel for your brain. But here's what researchers at the University of Westminster discovered in a landmark 2019 study. The quality of your CAR is heavily influenced by what you do in those first waking minutes. Certain behaviors amplify and optimize the response. Other behaviors blunt it, distort it, or cause it to spike chaotically. The worst thing you can do? Check your phone. We covered that in the last chapter. The flood of notifications creates artificial stress spikes that disrupt the natural cortisol curve. The second worst thing? Hit the snooze button. Here's why. When you fall back asleep after your alarm goes off, you don't get restful sleep. Your brain begins a new sleep cycle that it cannot complete. When the alarm goes off again 9 minutes later, you're being pulled out of the beginning stages of a cycle, which is neurologically far more disruptive than waking from a completed cycle. Each snooze hit makes the grogginess worse, not better. A 2022 study from the University of Notre Dame measured cognitive performance in participants who snoozed versus those who got up immediately. The snoozers showed 23% lower scores on attention tasks and 31% slower reaction times, effects that persisted for up to 4 hours after waking. 4 hours of impaired cognition because of a 9-minute snooze. That's the real cost. So what should you do instead? This is where the reset protocol begins. The first component is what I call the 90-second recalibration. Here's how it works. When your alarm goes off, you're going to resist every urge to snooze or grab your phone. Instead, you're going to stay in bed, but you're going to do something very specific. You're going to take 6 deep breaths using a technique called physiological sighing. Physiological sighing was identified by researchers at Stanford University's Department of Neurobiology as the fastest known method for reducing stress and activating the parasympathetic nervous system. It works like this. You take a deep breath in through your nose. Then, at the top of that breath, you take a second, shorter breath in, almost like a sip of air, to fully expand your lungs. Then you exhale slowly through your mouth, taking twice as long on the exhale as you did on the inhale. One cycle takes about 15 seconds. 6 cycles take 90 seconds. And in those 90 seconds, you accomplish something remarkable. You signal to your nervous system that you are safe, that there is no emergency, and that it's time to transition calmly into wakefulness. Your cortisol response optimizes. Your heart rate variability improves. Your brain shifts from reactive mode to responsive mode. This is the opposite of what average people do. Average people wake up an alarm, literally. The sound of the alarm triggers a mini stress response. Their first waking thought is often anxiety. I have to get up. I'm going to be late. I don't want to face today. They start their morning in fight or flight mode, and that sets the tone for everything that follows. Elite performers understand that the first 90 seconds are a neurological window of opportunity. They use that window to establish calm alertness rather than chaotic reactivity. They don't fight their way into the day. They flow into it. The second component of the reset phase is strategic light exposure. Your circadian rhythm, your internal body clock, is primarily regulated by light exposure to your eyes. When light hits the photoreceptors in your retina, it sends signals to the suprachiasmatic nucleus in your hypothalamus, which then orchestrates a cascade of hormonal responses. Morning light exposure tells your brain, it's daytime. It's time to be alert. It's time to suppress melatonin and optimize cortisol. Research from the Salk Institute for Biological Studies found that exposure to bright light within the first 15 minutes of waking increases daytime alertness by up to 64% and improves nighttime sleep quality by accelerating melatonin onset in the evening. In other words, morning light exposure doesn't just help your morning. It helps your entire 24-hour cycle. The protocol is simple. Within the first 5 minutes of getting out of bed, expose yourself to bright light. Ideally, this means stepping outside for even 60 seconds. Natural sunlight, even on a cloudy day, provides between 10,000 and 100,000 lux of light intensity. That's far more powerful than any indoor lighting. If getting outside isn't possible, maybe it's winter, maybe you live in an apartment without easy outdoor access. There's an alternative. Stand by a window. Open the blinds fully. Let the natural light hit your eyes. If even that isn't possible, consider a 10,000 lux light therapy lamp, the kind used to treat seasonal affective disorder. 60 seconds of exposure is enough to trigger the circadian response. I know this sounds almost too simple. Breathe for 90 seconds. Look at light for 60 seconds. How can this possibly make a significant difference? Here's the answer. These aren't random wellness tips. These are precise neurological interventions targeting specific biological systems. The breathing optimizes your autonomic nervous system and cortisol response. The light exposure calibrates your circadian rhythm and suppresses residual melatonin. Together, they create a foundation of calm, alert, optimized brain chemistry that everything else builds upon. The third component of the reset phase is what I call the temperature trigger. Your body temperature naturally drops during sleep and begins to rise as you approach waking. This temperature fluctuation is part of your circadian rhythm. You can accelerate the waking process by deliberately creating a temperature shift. The most effective method, according to research from the University of Amsterdam, is brief cold exposure. Not a 20-minute ice bath. Not a freezing cold shower that makes you miserable. A brief thermal shock, as little as 15 to 30 seconds, is sufficient to trigger norepinephrine release, increase blood flow, and signal to your body that sleep time is definitively over. Here's the practical application. At the end of your normal shower, turn the water to cold for the final 15 to 30 seconds. That's it. You don't need to stand under ice water for 10 minutes like some biohacking guru. 15 seconds of cold water hitting your body, particularly your face, chest, and back, triggers a norepinephrine surge of up to 250% above baseline, according to research published in the European Journal of Applied Physiology. This surge isn't stress, it's activation. Norepinephrine increases focus, alertness, and mood. It's the same neurochemical that medications for ADHD target, and you can trigger its release naturally in 15 seconds with nothing but cold water. Now, I want to acknowledge something important. Cold exposure isn't for everyone, and it isn't mandatory. If you have certain health conditions, or if cold exposure creates genuine distress rather than temporary discomfort, skip this component. The breathing and light exposure are the essential elements of reset. The temperature trigger is an accelerator, powerful but optional. Let me show you how this all fits together in practice. Your alarm goes off. Instead of hitting snooze or grabbing your phone, you stay in bed and perform 6 physiological sighs. This takes 90 seconds and transitions your nervous system from sleep to calm alertness. You then get out of bed and expose yourself to bright light, either by stepping outside briefly or standing by a window. This takes 60 seconds and calibrates your circadian rhythm. If you choose to include the temperature trigger, you do this during your shower, 15 to 30 seconds of cold water at the end. Total additional time, 0, since you were showering anyway. The entire reset phase takes approximately 2 to 3 minutes, and most of that time overlaps with things you're already doing. You're not adding a burden to your morning. You're optimizing what's already there. Here's the contrast that matters. Average people wake up in neurological chaos. Their cortisol spikes erratically. Their circadian rhythm is confused by artificial light and screen exposure. Their nervous system stays in reactive mode. They feel groggy, irritable, and unmotivated, not because something is wrong with them, but because they've never learned to manage their brain chemistry. Elite performers wake up with intentional neurological optimization. Their cortisol curve is smooth and energizing. Their circadian rhythm is properly calibrated. Their nervous system is calm but alert. They feel clear, focused, and ready, not because they're genetically superior, but because they understand the science and apply it systematically. The reset phase is now complete. Your brain chemistry is optimized. Your nervous system is calibrated. You've created the neurological foundation for a high-performance day. But here's what you need to understand. Brain chemistry alone isn't enough. An optimized brain without clear direction is just efficient wandering. You have the engine running smoothly, but you haven't programmed the destination. Your brain is now reset. But without the next step, it won't last. The clarity will fade. The alertness will diffuse. The potential will be wasted. That's why step 2, prime, is essential. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you how to program your mind for victory in less than 2 minutes. You'll learn why what you think in the first 5 minutes determines what you achieve in the next 5 years. And you'll discover a mental priming technique that elite performers use to maintain focus and motivation even in the most chaotic circumstances. Your brain is ready. Now it's time to give it a target. That's coming next. Chapter 5, Prime, Programming Your Mind for Victory. What you think in the first 5 minutes of your day determines what you achieve in the next 5 years. That's not motivation speak. That's neuroscience. Let me explain why this matters more than almost anything else in this book. Your brain processes approximately 11 million bits of sensory information every single second. But your conscious mind can only handle about 40 to 50 bits per second. That means your brain must filter out 99.9% of available information just to function. The question is, what determines what gets through and what gets filtered out? The answer is a small bundle of neurons at the base of your brain stem called the reticular activating system, or RAS. Think of the RAS as your brain's gatekeeper. It decides what's important enough to bring to your conscious attention and what gets relegated to background noise. Here's what makes this relevant to your morning. Your RAS is programmable, and the most powerful time to program it is during those first waking minutes, when your brain is in that suggestible, transitional state between sleep and full consciousness. Whatever you focus on in those early minutes becomes a filter instruction for your RAS. Focus on problems, and your RAS will scan for problems all day. Focus on obstacles, and obstacles will seem to appear everywhere. Focus on opportunities, and suddenly you'll notice possibilities you would have walked right past. This isn't mystical thinking. This is selective attention at work. Researchers at the University of Oregon demonstrated this phenomenon in a now famous study. Participants were primed with either achievement-related words or neutral words in the morning. Those primed with achievement words subsequently performed 23% better on problem-solving tasks and reported seeing significantly more opportunities throughout their day. They didn't become smarter. They didn't gain new skills. Their brains simply started filtering for different information. This is the power and the danger of your morning mental input. Most people prime their RAS completely by accident. They wake up and immediately absorb whatever random information hits them first. News headlines designed to trigger anxiety, social media posts engineered for outrage, emails carrying other people's priorities and problems. They're programming their brain's filter with someone else's agenda. And then they wonder why their day feels scattered, reactive, and out of control. The prime phase is about taking deliberate control of this process. It's about choosing what enters your mind first, and by extension, choosing what your brain will filter for throughout the day. Here's how it works. The prime phase has 3 components, and together they take less than 2 minutes. The first component is what I call the intention anchor. Research from Dr. Gail Matthews at Dominican University found that people who write down their goals are 42% more likely to achieve them. But here's what most people miss. It's not the writing that creates the effect. It's the clarity. The act of articulating an intention forces your brain to specify what it's looking for. The intention anchor takes this principle and applies it to your daily focus. Each morning, before you engage with any external input, you complete one simple sentence. Today, I am focused on. Not a list of 20 things. Not a vague aspiration. One specific focus for the day. Here's an example. Today, I am focused on completing the project proposal. Or, today, I am focused on being fully present with my family. Or, today, I am focused on having difficult conversations with courage. The specificity matters. Being productive is too vague. Your RAS can't filter for that. Completing the first draft of Chapter 3 is specific. Your brain now knows exactly what to prioritize. You can say this intention out loud or write it down. The key is articulation. Thinking it vaguely isn't enough. You need to express it clearly, in complete words, so your brain registers it as a command. This takes approximately 15 seconds, and it transforms your brain from a random filter to a targeted scanner. The second component of the prime phase is the 3-word morning mantra. This technique comes from research on self-affirmation theory, pioneered by Dr. Claude Steele at Stanford. But I've adapted it for the specific context of morning priming, based on what actually works in the real world. Here's the problem with traditional affirmations. Most of them don't work. If you stand in front of a mirror and say, "I am a millionaire," while your bank account says otherwise, your brain experiences cognitive dissonance. It knows you're lying to yourself. And that dissonance actually undermines confidence rather than building it. Effective morning priming requires a different approach. Instead of affirming outcomes you haven't achieved, you affirm the identity you're choosing to embody today. The 3-word morning mantra works like this. You choose 3 words that describe who you're committed to being today. Not who you wish you were. Not who you might become someday. Who you are choosing to be, starting right now. For example, focused, resilient, present, or calm, decisive, generous, or bold, patient, grateful. You speak these 3 words out loud, slowly and deliberately. As you say each word, you take a breath and let the word land. You're not just reciting, you're claiming. You're telling your brain, this is who I am today. Filter for opportunities to be this person. The research supports this approach. A 2020 study published in the journal Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin found that identity-based affirmations, statements about who you are rather than what you have, produced significantly stronger effects on subsequent behavior than outcome-based affirmations. When you affirm identity, your brain adjusts behavior to match. When you affirm outcomes, your brain often dismisses the statement as wishful thinking. The 3-word morning mantra takes approximately 15 seconds. Combined with the intention anchor, you're now 45 seconds in. The third component is what I call microvisualization. Visualization has gotten a complicated reputation. On one hand, elite athletes, surgeons, and performers have used mental rehearsal for decades with documented results. On the other hand, the self-help industry has turned visualization into magical thinking. Just imagine your dream house, and it will manifest. The science is clear. Visualization works, but only when it's specific, action-oriented, and brief. Researchers at the University of Chicago conducted a famous study comparing 3 groups of basketball players practicing free throws. One group physically practiced every day. One group only visualized practicing. One group did nothing. After 30 days, the physical practice group improved by 24%. The visualization-only group improved by 23%, almost identical. The control group showed no improvement. But here's the crucial detail that most people miss. The visualization group didn't imagine the ball going through the hoop. They mentally rehearsed the process, the stance, the grip, the arm motion, the release. Process visualization works. Outcome visualization is just daydreaming. The microvisualization in the prime phase applies this principle to your day. You're going to spend approximately 60 seconds mentally rehearsing how you want to show up today. Here's the technique. Close your eyes. Bring to mind one important moment in your upcoming day. A meeting, a conversation, a challenging task. Now mentally rehearse yourself moving through that moment as the person you described in your 3-word mantra. See yourself being focused or calm or bold, whatever words you chose. Visualize the process, not just the outcome. How do you carry yourself? How do you respond to challenges? How do you engage with others? This isn't fantasy. This is mental preparation. You're essentially giving your brain a preview of the performance you want to deliver. Elite athletes do this before every competition. Elite surgeons do this before every operation. Elite executives do this before every high-stakes meeting. They mentally rehearse success so that when the real moment comes, their brain has already practiced the pattern. Average people walk into important moments completely unrehearsed. They hope they'll show up well. They wish they'll perform at their best. And then they're surprised when anxiety, distraction, or reactivity takes over. They never gave their brain a chance to prepare. The microvisualization takes about 60 seconds. Combined with the intention anchor and the three-word mantra, the entire prime phase clocks in at under 2 minutes. Let me put this in perspective. In less than 120 seconds, you've accomplished 3 things that fundamentally alter your day. You've programmed your reticular activating system with a specific focus. You've established an identity anchor that shapes your behavior. And you've mentally rehearsed showing up as your best self in a key moment. Most people spend 2 minutes scrolling their phone and absorbing anxiety. You've spent 2 minutes engineering your mindset for success. Here's the contrast that separates outcomes. Average people let their mental state happen to them. They wake up, check their phone, and their first thoughts are reactions to external input. Their mood, focus, and mindset are determined by whatever the algorithm serves up or whatever emails arrived overnight. They start every day as a passenger in their own mind. Elite performers design their mental state deliberately. Their first thoughts are chosen, not reactive. Their mood, focus, and mindset are established by intention before external input has a chance to interfere. They start every day as the pilot, in command, with a clear destination programmed. The difference between these two approaches, compounded over weeks and months and years, is the difference between average results and unstoppable success. I want to address something you might be thinking. This sounds simple. 3 components, 2 minutes, just some words and mental imagery. Can this really make a meaningful difference? Here's my answer. Simplicity is a feature, not a bug. The most powerful interventions are often the simplest. What makes the prime phase effective isn't complexity. It's consistency and timing. You're targeting a specific neurological window with specific techniques that have research support. And you're doing it every single day. One morning of priming won't change your life, but 365 mornings of priming will transform it. The compound effect of starting each day with intentional mental programming creates a momentum that becomes virtually unstoppable. Your mind is now primed. Your RES is programmed. Your identity is anchored. Your performance is rehearsed. But here's the truth. A primed mind in a sluggish body is still operating at half capacity. Mental clarity without physical energy is like having a detailed map, but no fuel in the tank. You know exactly where to go, but you can't generate the momentum to get there. Your mind is primed. Now it's time to wake up your body. In the next chapter, I'm going to introduce you to the activate phase, a 2-minute energy ignition sequence that requires no equipment, no gym, and no athletic ability. You'll learn why you don't need a 45-minute workout to transform your physical state. You'll discover the NASA research that changed how astronauts, and now elite performers, think about morning movement. And you'll walk away with a specific protocol that floods your body with energy in 120 seconds. The next step changes everything physical. That's coming next. Chapter 6. Activate, the 2-minute energy ignition. You don't need a gym. You don't need equipment. You don't need 45 minutes. You need 2 minutes, and you need to know exactly what to do with them. Here's something the fitness industry doesn't want you to know. The elaborate morning workout routines they promote are not what elite performers actually do. Yes, many high achievers exercise regularly, but the research shows something surprising about when and how they do it. A 2023 study from the American College of Sports Medicine tracked the exercise habits of over 2,000 executives, entrepreneurs, and elite professionals. The finding that shocked the researchers: only 12% performed significant workouts in the morning before work. The vast majority did their primary exercise in the afternoon or evening. But here's what was different. 91% of the highest performers did some form of brief physical activation first thing in the morning. Not a workout, not a gym session. A short, deliberate movement sequence lasting between 90 seconds and 3 minutes. The researchers called this activation movement to distinguish it from exercise. And they found it had an outsized effect on energy, alertness, and productivity that persisted throughout the entire workday. This distinction matters. Exercise is about fitness, building strength, endurance, and physical capacity over time. Activation is about state change, shifting your physiology from rest to readiness immediately. They serve different purposes, and they require different approaches. Most people conflate the two. They think, if I can't do a full workout, why bother moving at all? So they skip physical movement entirely in the morning, and they pay for it with sluggish energy and foggy thinking for hours afterward. The activate phase solves this problem. It's not about fitness. It's about ignition. It's about sending a signal to your nervous system that says, sleep time is over. It's time to perform. Let me show you the science behind why this works. When you sleep, your body enters a state of reduced metabolic activity. Your heart rate drops. Your blood pressure decreases. Blood flow to your brain slows. Your muscles experience what's called sleep inertia, a temporary period of reduced performance and grogginess that can last anywhere from 15 minutes to 4 hours after waking. Most people try to overcome sleep inertia with caffeine. And while caffeine does help, it takes 20 to 30 minutes to reach peak effect. During that window, you're operating at reduced capacity, making decisions, engaging with information, and starting tasks while your brain is still partially offline. Physical movement accelerates the elimination of sleep inertia dramatically. Research from NASA, yes, the space agency, found that brief physical activity upon waking reduced sleep inertia duration by up to 60%. Astronauts on the International Space Station use specific movement protocols immediately after their sleep cycles to restore cognitive function as quickly as possible. When you're operating complex spacecraft systems, you can't afford to be groggy for 4 hours. Here's why movement works so effectively. When you engage your muscles, several things happen simultaneously. Your heart rate increases, pumping more blood to your brain. Your lungs expand more fully, increasing oxygen saturation. Your body releases a cascade of neurotransmitters, including dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin, that enhance mood and alertness. And your core body temperature rises, which is one of the primary signals your circadian system uses to determine wakefulness. All of this can be triggered in under 2 minutes. You don't need to run a marathon. You don't need to lift weights. You need to move with enough intensity to shift your physiological state. Now let me introduce you to the protocol, the 2-minute energy ignition. This sequence is designed based on research from the University of Georgia's Exercise Psychology Laboratory, NASA's Fatigue Countermeasures Program, and real-world testing with hundreds of professionals. It requires no equipment. It can be done in your bedroom, and it works even when you feel exhausted. The sequence has 3 phases, each approximately 40 seconds long. Phase 1 is wake the spine. Your spine has been in a horizontal position for hours. The discs between your vertebrae have rehydrated overnight, which is why you're actually slightly taller in the morning than at night. Your back muscles are cold and stiff. Before you do anything dynamic, you need to wake up your spinal column. Here's the movement. Stand with your feet shoulder-width apart. Reach both arms overhead. Interlace your fingers and stretch upward as tall as you can, like you're trying to touch the ceiling. Hold for 5 seconds while taking a deep breath. Then, keeping your arms overhead, lean slowly to the right, feeling the stretch along your left side. Hold for 5 seconds. Return to center and lean to the left. Hold for 5 seconds. Return to center, release your arms, and roll your shoulders backward 5 times, then forward 5 times. This entire sequence takes about 40 seconds. It mobilizes your spine, activates your postural muscles, and begins the process of increasing blood flow throughout your body. Phase 2 is ignite the core. Your core muscles, the muscles of your abdomen, lower back, and hips are the foundation of all movement. When they're engaged, you feel stable, grounded, and powerful. When they're dormant, you feel weak and sluggish. Phase 2 wakes them up. The movement is simple. You're going to perform what I call standing marches with engagement. Stand tall with your feet together. Brace your core. Imagine someone is about to push you and you need to stay stable. Now lift your right knee toward your chest, bringing it as high as comfortable while keeping your core engaged. Lower it and immediately lift your left knee. Continue alternating at a moderate pace, not running in place, but deliberate, controlled marches. Do this for 30 seconds. Then, for the final 10 seconds, increase the pace to double time. Quick, high knee marches that elevate your heart rate. By the end of these 40 seconds, you should feel warmth spreading through your body and your heart beating noticeably faster. Phase 3 is flood the system. This final phase is about creating a burst of intensity that triggers the full neurochemical cascade. You're going to perform a movement called explosive reaches. Here's how it works. Start in a slight squat position, knees bent, hips back, arms at your sides. Then explosively extend your body, jumping slightly off the ground while reaching both arms overhead. Land softly and immediately return to the squat position. Repeat. This isn't about height or athleticism. Even a tiny hop, or just rising forcefully onto your toes if jumping isn't possible for you, creates the explosive muscle engagement that triggers norepinephrine and dopamine release. Perform 10 to 15 explosive reaches in approximately 30 seconds. Then, for the final 10 seconds of phase 3, simply breathe deeply and shake out your arms and legs, allowing your system to integrate the activation. The entire sequence: wake the spine, 40 seconds. Ignite the core, 40 seconds. Flood the system, 40 seconds. Total time, 2 minutes. When you finish, you'll notice something immediate. Your heart is beating faster. Your breathing is deeper. Your skin may have a slight flush. These are signs that your cardiovascular system has shifted from rest to readiness. More importantly, your brain is now receiving increased blood flow, oxygen, and neurochemicals that support alertness and focus. Research from the University of British Columbia found that even brief bouts of physical activity increased the size and activity of the hippocampus, the brain region responsible for learning and memory. The effects are both immediate and cumulative. Each morning you complete the activate sequence. You're not just feeling more alert that day. You're building a brain that functions better over time. Let me give you the contrast that makes this real. Average people skip morning movement entirely. They roll out of bed, shuffle to the coffee maker, and spend the first hour of their day waiting for caffeine to override their biology. Their body stays in low-power mode. Their brain operates through a fog of sleep inertia. They feel sluggish, unmotivated, and physically heavy. And they assume this is just how mornings feel. Elite performers know better. They understand that the body leads the mind. When you activate your physiology, your psychology follows. They spend 2 minutes on deliberate movement that shifts their state, and then they experience a level of morning energy that coffee alone can never provide. They feel sharp, motivated, and physically light, not because they're different, because they've learned to work with their biology instead of against it. Here's something important I want you to understand about the activate phase. It's not optional, and it's not replaceable. Some people hear physical activation and think, I'll just have my coffee and feel fine. But caffeine doesn't replace movement. Caffeine blocks adenosine receptors, which reduces the sensation of tiredness. But it doesn't increase blood flow to the brain. It doesn't release dopamine and norepinephrine in the same way. It doesn't clear sleep inertia. Caffeine masks fatigue. Movement eliminates it. Other people think, I'll work out later, so I can skip the morning activation. But later workouts don't solve the morning problem. If you spend your first 2 hours in a fog, no afternoon gym session can recover that lost productivity. The activate phase isn't instead of exercise. It's in addition to whatever exercise you normally do. 2 minutes in the morning. Your regular workout whenever it fits your schedule. Both serve important purposes. Let me also address modifications. Not everyone can jump. Not everyone can stand easily. Not everyone has full mobility. The principle behind the activate phase, brief, deliberate movement that elevates heart rate and engages major muscle groups, can be adapted to virtually any physical situation. If you can't jump, rise forcefully onto your toes. If you can't stand, do seated marches and arm movements. If you have injuries or limitations, work within them. The goal isn't athletic performance. The goal is physiological state change. Any movement that increases your heart rate and engages your body will produce the neurochemical benefits. Your body is now awake. Your heart is pumping. Your brain is flooded with activation neurochemicals. The sleep inertia that would have clouded your first hours has been eliminated in 2 minutes. Energy is now flowing through your system. You feel alert. You feel ready. You feel physically capable of taking on the day. But here's the critical question. Ready for what? Energy without direction is just restlessness. Alertness without focus is just distraction. You can be fully activated, fully awake, fully energized, and still waste your morning on the wrong things. You can feel ready and still accomplish nothing that matters. Energy is flowing, but without focus, it's wasted. That's why the next step is essential. In the coming chapter, I'm going to show you the focus phase, a 90-second protocol that gives your energy a target. You'll learn why multitasking is destroying your productivity and what to do instead. You'll discover the single most important question to ask yourself each morning. And you'll understand why the first task you choose determines the trajectory of your entire day. The single task trigger changes everything. That's coming next. Chapter 7. Focus, the single task trigger. Multitasking is a myth, and it's costing you 40% of your productive capacity every single day. I need you to understand something that might challenge everything you believe about productivity. The human brain cannot multitask. It's not a limitation you can overcome with practice. It's not a skill you can develop. It's a fundamental constraint of neural architecture. When you think you're multitasking, you're actually task switching, rapidly bouncing your attention between different activities. And every switch comes with a cost. Researchers at the University of California, Irvine, led by Dr. Gloria Mark, spent over a decade studying attention and productivity in knowledge workers. Her findings were disturbing. The average professional switches tasks every 3 minutes and 5 seconds. Every 3 minutes. And after each switch, it takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to fully return to the original task. Do the math. If you're switching tasks every 3 minutes, but need 23 minutes to recover focus, you're essentially never reaching full cognitive capacity. You're operating in a perpetual state of partial attention. Never quite focused on anything, always slightly distracted by everything. Dr. Mark's research quantified the cost, 40%. That's how much productive capacity the average knowledge worker loses to task switching and attention fragmentation. Not because they're lazy, not because they lack discipline, because they've never learned to protect their focus. This brings us to a concept that changed my understanding of productivity entirely. It's called attention residue, and it was identified by Dr. Sophie Leroy at the University of Washington. Here's how attention residue works. When you switch from task A to task B, part of your cognitive processing remains stuck on task A. Your brain doesn't make clean transitions. It leaves residue, lingering thoughts, unresolved loops, background processing that continues even after you've moved on. Dr. Leroy's experiments demonstrated this vividly. Participants who switched from one task to another showed significantly impaired performance on the second task. Not because the second task was harder, but because their minds were still partially occupied with the first. The residue contaminated their focus. And here's the critical insight. The residue is worst when you switch away from an incomplete task. If you finish task A completely and then move to task B, the residue is minimal. But if you leave task A unfinished, to check email, respond to a message, or handle an interruption, the residue is substantial and persistent. This is why the modern work environment is so destructive to focus. Notifications constantly pull you away from what you're doing. Open-plan offices create endless interruptions. The expectation of immediate responsiveness to emails and messages means you're never fully present with any single task. You're drowning in attention residue, and you don't even know it. Now, what does this have to do with your morning? Everything. The first hour of your workday is the most valuable cognitive real estate you have. Research from the Harvard Business Review found that most people experience their peak mental acuity in the first 2 to 4 hours after waking. This is when your prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for complex thinking, creativity, and decision-making, is operating at maximum capacity. As the day progresses, cognitive fatigue accumulates. By afternoon, your brain is running on fumes compared to its morning potential. Most people waste this precious window. They spend their first hour checking email, which is essentially processing other people's priorities. They respond to messages, which puts them in reactive mode. They attend morning meetings, which fragments their attention before they've accomplished anything meaningful. By the time they get to their important work, their best cognitive hours are gone. Elite performers do the opposite. They protect their first hour with ruthless discipline. They know that the tasks they tackle first will receive their best thinking. So they ensure those tasks are their most important ones, not their most urgent, not their easiest, not whoever screamed loudest overnight. They're most important. This is the focus phase of the unstoppable morning protocol. It's about establishing clarity on your single most important task before your day begins, and committing to protect your focus on that task before anything else intrudes. Here's the protocol. It takes approximately 90 seconds and consists of 2 components. The first component is what I call the MIT question. MIT stands for Most Important Task. Before you engage with email, messages, or any external input, you ask yourself one question. What is the one task that, if I complete it today, will make this day a success? Not the 5 tasks, not the urgent tasks, not the task someone else is waiting on. The one task that would make you feel accomplished even if everything else went sideways. This question forces prioritization. It cuts through the noise of your to-do list and identifies the single point of highest leverage. And by asking it before you're exposed to external input, you ensure the answer comes from your priorities, not someone else's emergency. Speak the answer out loud. My MIT today is, and complete the sentence with specificity. Not work on the project, but complete the first draft of the project proposal. Not deal with the budget, but finalize the Q3 budget projections. Specificity creates accountability. Vagueness creates wiggle room for avoidance. This takes approximately 30 seconds. But those 30 seconds prevent hours of scattered, unfocused activity. The second component is the first focus commitment. Once you've identified your MIT, you make a commitment. You will work on that task first, before checking email, before responding to messages, before attending to anyone else's agenda. Your first focus hour, or at minimum, your first focus block of 30 minutes, belongs to your most important task. Here's the commitment statement. Before I do anything else, I will spend time commitment on MIT. For example, before I do anything else, I will spend 60 minutes on completing the first draft of the project proposal. Or, before I do anything else, I will spend 30 minutes on finalizing the Q3 budget projections. You're not committing to finishing the task. You're committing to giving it your first, best attention. Whatever you accomplish in that protected time will be accomplished with your full cognitive capacity. No attention residue, no multitasking tax, no fragmentation. This commitment takes 15 seconds to articulate. Combined with the MIT question, the entire focus phase takes less than 90 seconds. Now let me explain why this simple protocol produces such outsized results. When you identify your MIT and commit to tackling it first, you create what psychologists call implementation intention. Decades of research, beginning with Dr. Peter Gollwitzer at New York University, have shown that implementation intentions dramatically increase follow-through. Simply deciding, I should work on important things, produces minimal behavior change. But specifying, I will work on X at Y time, creates a mental trigger that makes action nearly automatic. Your first focus commitment is an implementation intention. By stating what you'll do and when you'll do it, you've pre-decided your behavior. When the moment comes, you don't have to deliberate. You don't have to overcome resistance. The decision is already made. You just execute. Here's the contrast that separates outcomes. Average people start their workday in reactive mode. They open their laptop and immediately check email. Their first thought is, what does everyone else need from me? They spend their first hour responding, replying, and reacting. By the time they turn to their own priorities, their best cognitive hours are exhausted, their attention is fragmented with residue from dozens of small tasks, and their important work receives their worst, most depleted thinking. Elite performers start their workday in proactive mode. Before they open email, they've already identified their MIT. Their first thought is, what's the most important thing I can accomplish today? They spend their first hour in focused creation, producing their most important work with their best cognitive resources. When they eventually turn to email and messages, they do so from a position of accomplishment rather than anxiety. They've already won the day. The difference compounds dramatically over time. If you capture just one additional hour of peak cognitive performance per day by protecting your first focus block, that's 5 hours per week. 260 hours per year. That's 6.5 additional weeks of your best thinking, applied to your most important work. The productivity gap this creates between you and your unfocused peers becomes insurmountable. I want to address the objection I hear most often, but I have to check email in the morning. People expect immediate responses. I can't ignore my inbox for an hour. Here's the truth. In almost every profession, the expectation of immediate email response is an illusion, a norm that emerged from habit, not necessity. Researchers at the University of British Columbia conducted an experiment where professionals limited email checking to 3 times per day instead of continuously. The result? No negative impact on work outcomes, but significant improvements in stress, focus, and reported well-being. The world will not end if you respond to emails at 9 a.m. instead of 8 a.m. The urgent matters that truly require immediate attention are almost never delivered via email. They come as phone calls or in-person interruptions. What feels urgent in your inbox is almost always someone else's priority trying to hijack your attention. Protecting your first focus hour isn't selfish. It's strategic. It's how you ensure that your most important work receives your most capable thinking. And ultimately, doing your most important work well benefits everyone, including the people sending those emails. The focus phase is now complete. You know your MIT. You've committed to your first focus block. Your energy has a target. Your attention has a priority. You're now reset, primed, activated, and focused. For steps complete. But there's one more element that transforms this from a good morning into an unstoppable one: momentum. You can have perfect brain chemistry. You can have a focused mind and an energized body. You can know exactly what to work on. But if you don't start, if you don't take that first action, all that potential remains unrealized. The system needs ignition. It needs launch. The first task you complete sets the tone for every task that follows. That psychological truth is the foundation of the final step in the unstoppable morning protocol. In the next chapter, I'm going to show you the launch phase, a specific technique for creating completion momentum that carries through your entire day. You'll learn about the psychology of the first win and why small completions create big results. You'll discover the 2-minute win protocol that elite performers use to ignite their productivity. And you'll understand why finishing something small is more powerful than starting something big. Your unstoppable day is about to begin. The launch phase makes it real. That's coming next. Chapter 8. Launch, the day ignition sequence. The first task you complete sets the tone for every task that follows. This isn't motivation advice. This is how your brain actually works. There's a phenomenon in psychology called the Zeigarnik effect, named after Soviet psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik, who discovered it in the 1920s. She noticed something peculiar about waiters in a busy Vienna cafe. They could remember complex orders with perfect accuracy, but only until the order was delivered. The moment the food hit the table and the task was complete, the details vanished from memory. Zeigarnik's subsequent research revealed a fundamental truth about the human mind. Incomplete tasks create psychological tension. They occupy mental bandwidth. They nag at us, demanding closure. But completed tasks release that tension. They free up cognitive resources. And here's the key insight. They create momentum for the next task. Your brain doesn't just track what you've done. It tracks what you've finished. And finishing something, anything, triggers a neurochemical reward that primes you for further action. This is why the launch phase exists. It's about creating completion momentum at the very beginning of your day. Before you tackle your MIT, before you dive into deep work, you're going to finish something small. That completion will release a cascade of neurochemicals that make everything else easier. Let me show you the science behind this. When you complete a task, even a small one, your brain releases dopamine. We've discussed dopamine before. It's your motivation molecule, the neurochemical that drives you to pursue goals and take action. But here's what most people don't understand. Dopamine isn't just released when you finish big, important tasks. It's released proportionally to your perception of completion, not to the objective size of the accomplishment. Researchers at the University of Michigan's Department of Psychology demonstrated this in a clever experiment. Participants were given tasks of varying sizes to complete. The dopamine response, measured through proxy indicators, was nearly identical whether they completed a 5-minute task or a 50-minute task. What mattered wasn't the size. What mattered was the completion. This has profound implications for how you should structure your morning. If completing a small task produces the same motivational boost as completing a large task, then strategically completing something small first gives you the neurochemical fuel to tackle something big afterward. It's like using kindling to start a fire. You don't hold a match to a massive log and expect it to ignite. You start with small, easily combustible material. Once that's burning, the flames have enough energy to catch the larger wood. Your morning works the same way. Small completion ignites the momentum that catches larger accomplishments. This brings me to the core protocol of the launch phase, the 2-minute win. Here's how it works. Before you begin your MIT, your most important task, you identify and complete one small task that takes 2 minutes or less. Not 2 hours, not 20 minutes, 2 minutes maximum. The task should be concrete, completable, and satisfying. Making your bed counts. Sending one specific email counts. Clearing 3 items from your desk counts. Writing the first paragraph of a document counts. Processing a single item from your inbox counts. What doesn't count? Tasks that are vague, ongoing, or impossible to complete in 2 minutes. Working on the project doesn't count. It's not completable. Checking email doesn't count. It's an endless activity, not a finite task. Organizing my desk might take 20 minutes. The task must have a clear endpoint that you can reach in 120 seconds. When you complete your 2-minute win, something important happens. You've proven to yourself and to your brain that you are someone who finishes things. You've established a pattern of completion. You've triggered the dopamine release that fuels further action. And you've created what psychologists call success momentum. Dr. Teresa Amabile at Harvard Business School has spent her career studying motivation and progress in the workplace. Her research, published as The Progress Principle, revealed that the single most powerful motivator for performance is the sense of making progress on meaningful work. Not rewards, not recognition, not fear of failure. Progress. And here's the crucial finding. The progress doesn't need to be large to be motivating. Small wins, even tiny wins, produce the same motivational effect as major breakthroughs. What matters is the perception of forward movement. Your 2-minute win creates that perception. Even though the task is small, completing it registers as progress. Your brain doesn't dismiss it because of its size. Your brain celebrates it because of its completion. And that celebration, that small neurochemical reward, creates appetite for more. This is the launch sequence in action. You've spent approximately 8 minutes on reset, prime, activate, and focus. Now you spend 2 minutes on your 2-minute win. And then, fueled by completion momentum, you launch into your MIT with energy, clarity, and the psychological wind at your back. Let me show you how this plays out in practice. Sarah Chun is a product manager at a major technology company. Before implementing the unstoppable morning protocol, her mornings were a struggle. She'd arrive at her desk, open her laptop, and immediately feel overwhelmed by the 117 emails that had accumulated overnight. She'd spend her first 2 hours drowning in other people's requests, never quite getting to her own priorities. By the time she tried to do strategic work, she was mentally exhausted and fragmented. When I introduced her to the 2-minute win concept, she was skeptical. Making her bed or sending one email seemed trivial compared to her crushing workload. How could something so small possibly matter? But she tried it. Each morning, before opening her laptop, she completed one small task. Sometimes it was organizing her desk. Sometimes it was writing a single thank you message. Sometimes it was reviewing and filing one document. Never more than 2 minutes. The effect surprised her. It's like a psychological gear shift, she told me after 2 weeks. That tiny completion makes me feel like I'm already winning. When I sit down to tackle my real work, I'm not starting from zero. I'm building on momentum that already exists. Within a month, Sarah reported a dramatic change in her productivity. She was completing her most important work in the morning before email took over. Her stress levels dropped. Her output increased. And it all started with a 2-minute task that seemed almost laughably insignificant. This is the paradox of the launch phase. The smaller the initial win, the more powerful its effect. Large tasks have high activation energy. They're intimidating, and the brain resists starting them. Small tasks have low activation energy. They're easy to begin, easy to complete, and their completion generates the momentum needed to tackle larger challenges. Here's the contrast that matters. Average people try to start their day with their biggest, hardest task. They've heard advice like, eat the frog. Tackle your worst task first. And while there's wisdom in prioritizing difficult work, this approach ignores the reality of activation energy. Facing a massive task when your momentum is zero often leads to procrastination, avoidance, and a scattered attempt to warm up with email or busy work. The big task feels like pushing a boulder uphill from a standing start. Elite performers understand the power of strategic sequencing. They don't start with the boulder. They start with the pebble. They complete something small, something guaranteed to succeed, and use that success to fuel their attack on the larger challenge. The big task feels like pushing a boulder that's already rolling. Momentum changes everything. I want to address something important about the 2-minute win. It must come before your MIT, not instead of it. Some people hear this concept and think, great, I'll just do easy tasks all day and ride the dopamine wave. That's not the protocol. That's procrastination disguised as productivity. The 2-minute win is the match that lights the fire. Your MIT is the fire. You don't keep lighting matches instead of building the fire. You use one match, strategically, to ignite the blaze that actually produces heat. The sequence matters. 2-minute win, then immediately into your MIT. No gap, no email check. No, just one more small thing. Completion, then launch. That's how momentum works. If you insert distractions between your win and your MIT, the momentum dissipates. You have to catch the wave while it's cresting. Let me give you a practical structure for the launch phase. The night before or during your focus phase, identify your 2-minute win for tomorrow morning. Choose something specific, concrete, and completable. Write it down if it helps. When morning comes, after completing reset, prime, activate, and focus, execute your 2-minute win immediately. Feel the completion. Acknowledge it mentally. Even a simple done, spoken aloud reinforces the completion signal to your brain. Then, without pause, transition directly to your MIT. You have momentum. Use it. The entire protocol, from identifying the task to completing it, takes 2 minutes. But those 2 minutes transform your psychological state from static to dynamic, from potential to kinetic, from planning to producing. Your launch sequence is now complete. Let's take stock of where you are. You've reset your brain chemistry, optimizing cortisol, calibrating your circadian rhythm, establishing calm alertness. You've primed your mind for victory, programming your RAS, anchoring your identity, rehearsing success. You've activated your body, eliminating sleep inertia, flooding your system with energy, shifting from rest to readiness. You've established focus, identifying your MIT, committing to your first focus block, directing your attention. And you've launched your momentum, completing your 2-minute win, triggering success chemistry, preparing for productive ignition. 10 minutes. 5 steps. A complete transformation of how you start your day. But here's what I need to tell you before we go further. Life doesn't always cooperate. You're going to have mornings where everything goes wrong. The baby was up all night. You're getting sick. You overslept by an hour. A crisis erupted that demands immediate attention. The perfectly structured morning you planned simply isn't possible. What happens then? Do you abandon the protocol entirely? Do you beat yourself up for failing? Do you declare the day a loss before it's begun? No, you adapt. That's why the next chapter is crucial. I'm going to show you the resilience protocol, how to maintain your momentum when life attacks your morning. You'll learn the 3-minute emergency version of the unstoppable morning protocol. You'll discover why imperfect action beats perfect inaction every time. And you'll understand how elite performers stay consistent even when circumstances are anything but. Bad nights happen. Chaos happens. Here's how unstoppable people respond. That's coming next. Chapter 9. When life attacks, the resilience protocol. Bad nights happen. Chaos happens. And here's what separates the unstoppable from everyone else. They don't need perfect conditions to perform. Let me tell you about Marcus Williams. Marcus is a senior executive at a Fortune 100 company, a father of 3, and one of the most consistently high-performing people I've ever encountered. When I first met him, I assumed his success came from rigid discipline. Perfect routines executed with military precision every single day. I was wrong. My life is chaos, Marcus told me. 3 kids under 10. A wife with her own demanding career. International travel. Conference calls at odd hours. If I waited for the perfect morning, I'd never have a good morning. What Marcus had wasn't perfect conditions. It was a resilience system, a way of maintaining momentum even when everything went sideways. And that system is what I'm going to teach you in this chapter. Here's the truth that most productivity advice ignores. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. Consistency means adaptation. It means showing up in some form even when the ideal form isn't possible. The people who build unstoppable momentum aren't the ones who execute perfectly when conditions are easy. They're the ones who execute adequately when conditions are hard. Research from the University of Pennsylvania's Positive Psychology Center, led by Dr. Angela Duckworth, demonstrates this clearly. In her studies on grit and long-term achievement, she found that the highest performers weren't distinguished by their best days. They were distinguished by their worst days. When conditions deteriorated, average performers abandoned their practices entirely. High performers scaled down but never stopped. That difference, maintaining some form of the practice versus abandoning it completely, predicted success more reliably than any other factor. This is the principle I call minimum viable morning, and it's the foundation of the resilience protocol. Here's the concept. Your full unstoppable morning protocol takes 10 minutes and includes all 5 steps: reset, prime, activate, focus, and launch. That's the ideal. That's what you do when conditions allow. But when life attacks, when you're sick, exhausted, overwhelmed, or facing genuine emergencies, you don't need the full protocol. You need the minimum version that maintains momentum. The minimum viable morning takes 3 minutes. It includes the essential elements from each phase, compressed to their most concentrated form. It's not optimal. It's not ideal, but it keeps the chain unbroken. And an unbroken chain, even of imperfect links, is infinitely stronger than a broken one. Let me walk you through the 3-minute emergency protocol. Minute 1, compressed reset and prime. Instead of the full 90-second breathing sequence, you take 3 deep physiological sighs, 3 breaths instead of 6. This takes approximately 20 seconds and still activates your parasympathetic nervous system. Then, instead of the full prime sequence, you ask one question: who do I need to be today? You answer with a single word, your identity anchor for the day. Focused, calm, patient, resilient, whatever you need most. Speak that word out loud once, with intention. This takes approximately 10 seconds. If possible, expose yourself to light during this minute. Stand by a window, step outside briefly, or simply turn on bright lights. If not possible, skip it. The breathing and identity anchor are the non-negotiables. Total time, approximately 60 seconds. Minute 2, compressed activate and focus. Instead of the full 2-minute energy ignition, you do 30 seconds of movement. Any movement. Jumping jacks, squats, marching in place, arm circles. The specific movement matters less than the act of moving. 30 seconds of deliberate physical activation is enough to shift your physiology from sleep to wakefulness. Then, in the remaining 30 seconds, you identify your MIT. Ask, what is the one thing that must happen today? Not what should happen. What must happen? When you're in crisis mode, you don't have bandwidth for multiple priorities. You need one clear target. State it out loud. Total time, approximately 60 seconds. Minute 3, compressed launch. Your 2-minute win becomes a 1-minute win. Identify the smallest possible task you can complete right now, something that takes 60 seconds or less. Make your bed with a single motion rather than perfect corners. Send a 2-sentence email. Put 3 items in their proper place. Complete one tiny thing. Then declare, I've started. I'm in motion. Total time, approximately 60 seconds. 3 minutes total. Reset, prime, activate, focus, launch. All represented, all compressed, all accomplished before the chaos of your day takes over. Is this optimal? No. Will you feel as energized and focused as you would with the full protocol? No. But here's what you will have: continuity, identity, momentum. You will have proven to yourself that you are someone who shows up even when conditions are against you. And that proof, that evidence of your own resilience, is more valuable than any single perfect morning. Now let me explain the psychology behind why this matters so much. There's a phenomenon in behavior change called the what the hell effect. Researchers at the University of Toronto identified it while studying dieters. When dieters broke their diet, even slightly, many of them didn't just have a small slip. They abandoned the diet entirely for the rest of the day, thinking, I already failed, so what the hell? I might as well eat whatever I want. The same phenomenon applies to morning routines. When people can't execute their ideal morning because of poor sleep, unexpected demands, or simple bad luck, many abandon the routine entirely. They think, I can't do my full routine, so what's the point? I'll start again tomorrow. This is catastrophic for momentum. Every time you skip your routine entirely, you weaken the neural pathways that support it. Every time you tell yourself, I'll start again tomorrow, you train your brain that the routine is optional, something to do when convenient rather than a non-negotiable part of your identity. The resilience protocol breaks the what the hell effect. By having a scaled-down version ready, you never face the binary choice between perfect and nothing. You always have a middle option: imperfect but present, scaled down but showing up, compromised but consistent. And here's what the research shows. Imperfect action beats perfect inaction every single time. A 3-minute routine done on a hard day builds more long-term momentum than a 10-minute routine that only happens when conditions are ideal. Let me share some wisdom from an unexpected source: the United States Navy SEALs. SEAL training is designed to produce warriors who can perform under the worst possible conditions: sleep-deprived, physically exhausted, mentally strained, operating in chaos and uncertainty. How do they do it? Not by training only in optimal conditions, by training specifically in degraded conditions. Former Navy SEAL Commander Mark Devine, who founded the SEALFIT program, describes a concept called embracing the suck. The idea is simple. When conditions are terrible, you don't pretend they're not terrible. You acknowledge the difficulty, and then you perform anyway. You develop what Devine calls mental toughness through voluntary discomfort. The resilience protocol applies this principle to your morning. When conditions are bad, you don't pretend they're not bad. You acknowledge that today is hard, and then you execute anyway. Not the full protocol, but the emergency version. You embrace the suck and show up regardless. This builds something more valuable than any single morning routine. It builds identity. Every time you execute the 3-minute emergency protocol on a hard day, you're collecting evidence that you are someone who shows up no matter what. That evidence accumulates. That identity solidifies. And eventually, showing up becomes who you are, not just what you do when it's easy. Here's the contrast that separates trajectories. Average people are conditional performers. They execute when conditions are good. They skip when conditions are bad. Their consistency is at the mercy of their circumstances. A bad night means a bad morning, means a bad day, means I'll try again next week. Their identity as someone with a morning practice is fragile, easily broken by adversity. Elite performers are unconditional performers. They execute in some form regardless of conditions. They scale up when circumstances allow and scale down when they don't, but they never scale to zero. Their consistency is self-determined, not circumstance-determined. A bad night means a 3-minute morning, means preserved momentum, means I showed up anyway. Their identity as someone with a morning practice is resilient, forged in adversity. The gap between these two approaches seems small on any given day. 3 minutes versus 0 minutes. What's the difference? But compounded over months and years, the gap becomes a canyon. The unconditional performer builds an unbroken chain of practice. The conditional performer builds a chain full of gaps. And chains with gaps don't hold anything. I want to leave you with one more principle before we move to the final chapter. There's a saying among elite performers: never miss twice. The idea is simple. Everyone misses occasionally. Everyone has days where even the 3-minute version doesn't happen. Genuine emergencies, illness, circumstances beyond your control. Missing once is human. Missing twice is a pattern. If you miss your morning protocol one day, your only job is to show up the next day. Not perfectly, not with compensation or extra effort. Just show up. Execute your routine, full or compressed, and get back on track. 1 miss is a stumble. 2 misses starts becoming your new normal. The resilience protocol gives you the tool to make never miss twice achievable. Even on the worst days, you can find 3 minutes. Even when everything is falling apart, you can take 3 breaths, say 1 word, move for 30 seconds, name 1 priority, and complete 1 tiny task. 3 minutes to keep the chain unbroken. 3 minutes to preserve your identity. 3 minutes to stay unstoppable. You now have everything you need. You have the full unstoppable morning protocol. 10 minutes that transform your brain chemistry, prime your mindset, activate your body, focus your attention, and launch your momentum. You have the 3-minute emergency protocol, the scaled-down version that maintains consistency when life attacks. You have the understanding of why these practices work, the neuroscience, the psychology, the research that makes this more than motivational advice. But knowledge without application is just information. Protocols without practice are just theory. The question isn't whether you understand this material. The question is whether you'll become the person who lives it. That's what the final chapter is about. We're going to talk about identity, about who you're becoming through these practices. We're going to talk about the 21-day challenge that transforms knowledge into habit. And we're going to talk about what your life looks like 1 year from now if you show up consistently. This isn't about morning routines anymore. This is about who you're choosing to become. That's coming next. Chapter 10, Becoming Unstoppable, Your New Identity. This isn't about morning routines anymore. This is about who you're becoming. I need you to understand something fundamental before we go any further. Everything I've shared with you in this audiobook, the neuroscience, the protocols, the research, it's all valuable. But none of it matters if you see it as just another productivity hack. Another technique to try. Another thing to add to your already overwhelming list of self-improvement strategies. The people who transform their lives through morning practices don't treat them as techniques. They treat them as identity. Let me explain what I mean. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits and one of the world's leading researchers on behavior change, identified something that revolutionized our understanding of how lasting change actually happens. He calls it identity-based habits, and it's built on a simple but profound insight. The most effective way to change your behavior is to change your beliefs about who you are. Here's how it works. There are 3 levels at which change can occur. The first level is outcomes, the results you want. Losing weight, making more money, being more productive. Most people start here. They set goals based on outcomes, and try to force their behavior to match. The second level is processes, the systems and habits you implement. Eating healthier, following a budget, executing a morning routine. This is better than focusing only on outcomes because it addresses the mechanics of change. But the third level, the deepest level, is identity. Who you believe yourself to be, what you consider part of your self-image, the type of person you see when you look in the mirror. Clear's research shows that lasting change almost always starts at the identity level and works outward. When your behavior aligns with your identity, it feels natural. When it conflicts with your identity, it feels like constant effort. You can force yourself to behave against your identity for a while, but eventually, identity wins. This is why most morning routines fail. People try to adopt the behaviors of elite performers without adopting the identity. They go through the motions without becoming the person who naturally does those things. And when the initial motivation fades, when life gets hard, when the alarm goes off and they don't feel like getting up, their identity reasserts itself. I'm not a morning person. I'm not disciplined. This isn't really me. The Unstoppable Morning Protocol isn't just a set of behaviors. It's a path to a new identity. Every time you execute the protocol, full or compressed, you're casting a vote for the person you're becoming. Every morning you show up, you're collecting evidence that you are someone who takes control of their day, someone who doesn't negotiate with excuses, someone who is, in the most literal sense, unstoppable. Let me show you how this identity transformation actually works in the brain. Neuroscientists at University College London, led by Dr. Philippa Lally, conducted groundbreaking research on habit formation. They found that the average time for a new behavior to become automatic, to feel natural rather than effortful, is 66 days. But here's the more interesting finding. The range was enormous, from 18 days to 254 days, depending on the person and the behavior. What determined whether someone was on the fast end or the slow end of that range? The researchers identified several factors, but one stood out above the rest: identity congruence. When people viewed the new behavior as consistent with who they were or who they were becoming, habit formation accelerated dramatically. When they viewed it as something external, something they were trying, habit formation stalled. This is why I've structured this audiobook the way I have. I haven't just given you techniques. I've given you understanding of your brain, your biology, your psychology. I've shown you why these practices work at a fundamental level. And I've framed everything around the identity of being unstoppable. Because here's the truth. You're not trying to do a morning routine. You're becoming someone for whom this morning routine is natural. You're not adding a behavior to your life. You're evolving into a different kind of person. Let me tell you about the moment this shift happened for a man named David Park. David was a software engineer in Seattle, talented but perpetually underperforming relative to his potential. When he first started the Unstoppable Morning Protocol, he approached it like a project. He tracked his compliance in a spreadsheet. He analyzed his results. He optimized his sequence. It was very much an external thing he was doing. Around day 40, something shifted. David described it to me later. I woke up one morning and I just did it. Without thinking, without deciding, without any internal negotiation. It was like asking me whether I brushed my teeth. Of course I did. That's just what I do. And I realized, this is who I am now. I'm someone who owns their morning. That moment, when the behavior shifts from something you do to something you are, is the identity transformation. It's not dramatic. It often goes unnoticed in the moment. But it's the difference between temporary change and permanent transformation. Here's what I want you to understand. You don't have to wait 66 days for this shift to happen. You can accelerate it by consciously claiming the identity now. Every morning, when you execute the protocol, tell yourself, this is who I am. I am someone who owns their morning. Say it out loud if you can. Write it down if that helps. But make the identity claim explicit. When you face resistance, when the alarm goes off and you want to hit snooze, don't fight it with willpower. Fight it with identity. Ask yourself, what would an unstoppable person do right now? And then do that. Not because you're forcing yourself, because that's who you are. When you miss a day, and you will, everyone does, don't catastrophize. Don't let one miss become evidence that you're not really this kind of person. Remember, never miss twice. Show up the next day and reclaim your identity with your actions. This is the deeper game we're playing. Yes, the unstoppable morning protocol will improve your energy, focus, and productivity. Those are real, measurable benefits. But the ultimate benefit is bigger than any single morning. It's the person you become through the consistent practice of showing up for yourself. Now I want to address something that often comes up at this point. Some people hear identity change and think it sounds like self-delusion. They think, I can't just decide I'm a different person. That's not how it works. And they're right. You can't just decide to be different and have it magically happen. But that's not what I'm proposing. Identity change isn't about pretending to be someone you're not. It's about providing evidence to yourself, through action, that you're becoming who you want to be. Every morning you execute the protocol, you generate evidence. Every time you show up despite resistance, you generate evidence. Every time you adapt with the 3-minute emergency protocol instead of skipping entirely, you generate evidence. Over time, that evidence accumulates. And your brain, which is constantly updating its model of who you are based on your behavior, starts to shift. You're not pretending. You're proving. You're not imagining a different identity. You're building it, one morning at a time. Dr. Carol Dweck at Stanford University calls this the growth mindset, the understanding that your qualities and abilities aren't fixed, but can be developed through effort and practice. People with a growth mindset don't say, I'm not a morning person, as a permanent fact. They say, I haven't been a morning person yet, as a temporary state that can change. The unstoppable morning protocol, practiced consistently, is how yet becomes now. I want to share one more concept before we move to the practical challenge in the next chapter. It's something I call the compound identity effect. In finance, compound interest is called the eighth wonder of the world. Small amounts, invested consistently over time, grow into enormous sums. The math is almost magical. A few percent per year, compounded over decades, creates wealth that seems disproportionate to the original investment. Your identity works the same way. Each morning you show up, you're making a small investment in who you're becoming. That single morning, by itself, doesn't seem significant. What's one day? What's 10 minutes? But those investments compound. Day after day, your brain accumulates evidence. Your self-image shifts. Your automatic behaviors change. Your baseline energy increases. Your default focus sharpens. Your resilience deepens. And one day, maybe day 30, maybe day 90, maybe day 180, you look back and realize you've become someone fundamentally different from who you were when you started. Not because of any single morning, because of the compound effect of consistent mornings. This is why I keep emphasizing consistency over perfection. A perfect morning that you do once has almost no compound effect. An imperfect morning that you do daily has enormous compound effect. The 3-minute emergency protocol on a hard day is worth more than the full protocol on a single easy day because it keeps the compounding going. Here's the math that should motivate you. If you execute some version of the unstoppable morning protocol 300 days this year, accounting for illness, emergencies, and the occasional genuine miss, you will have invested 50 hours in deliberate morning practice. 50 hours of optimizing your brain chemistry. 50 hours of priming your mindset. 50 hours of building the identity of someone who is unstoppable. What could 50 hours of focused identity building be worth to your career, your relationships, your health, your sense of self? The answer is potentially everything. Now, I want to acknowledge something important. Right now, you're in a particular psychological state. You've listened to this entire audiobook. You're motivated. You understand the concepts. You feel ready to change. This is the peak of what researchers call intention, the gap between wanting to do something and actually doing it. But intention, by itself, doesn't produce results. The road from intention to action to habit to identity is long, and it's littered with the abandoned commitments of people who felt exactly like you feel right now. The next chapter is designed to bridge that gap. I'm going to give you a specific 21-day challenge. a structured path from where you are now to where you want to be. I'm going to show you exactly what to do on day 1, day 7, day 14, and day 21. And I'm going to paint a picture of where you'll be 1 year from now if you follow through. You have the knowledge. You have the protocols. You have the understanding. Now it's time to become the person who uses them. Your 21-day transformation begins in the next chapter, and it begins tomorrow morning. Chapter 11, the 21-day unstoppable challenge. Tomorrow morning, your transformation begins. The only question is, will you show up? I've given you everything you need, the science, the protocols, the mindset. But knowledge without action is just entertainment. And I didn't create this audiobook to entertain you. I created it to transform you. So here's my challenge. 21 days. 3 weeks. That's all I'm asking for. Not a lifetime commitment. Not a promise to be perfect forever. Just 21 days of showing up. Why 21 days? The old myth says it takes 21 days to form a habit. The research shows that's not quite accurate. True automaticity often takes longer. But 21 days is long enough for something crucial to happen. You start to see results. You accumulate enough evidence to shift your self-perception. You build enough momentum that stopping feels harder than continuing. 21 days is the bridge between trying something new and becoming someone new. Let me walk you through exactly how this challenge works. The 21-day unstoppable challenge has 4 phases, each with specific goals and milestones. I'm going to tell you exactly what to expect, exactly what to do, and exactly how to handle the obstacles that will inevitably arise. Phase 1, days 1 through 7, the foundation. The first week is about establishing the basic pattern. Your only goal is execution, doing the protocol in some form every single day. Day 1 is the most important day of the challenge. Not because it's the hardest, it usually isn't. Day 1 typically has high motivation and fresh energy. Day 1 is important because it establishes precedent. It's your first vote for your new identity. On day 1, execute the full unstoppable morning protocol. All 5 steps. All 10 minutes. Don't modify it. Don't shortcut it. Give yourself the complete experience so you know what you're building toward. Days 2 through 4 are where the first resistance appears. The novelty has worn off. The alarm feels louder. The bed feels warmer. Your brain starts generating reasons to skip just this once. This is normal. This is expected. And this is where most people fail. Your job on days 2 through 4 is simple. Show up anyway. If you can do the full protocol, do it. If you're struggling, do the 3-minute emergency protocol. But do something. Do not let the chain break in the first week. Days 5 through 7 often bring a small reward. By now, you may start noticing differences, better energy, clearer thinking, a sense of accomplishment that colors your morning. These early results aren't dramatic, but they're real. Pay attention to them. They're evidence that this works. At the end of week 1, take 5 minutes to reflect. Ask yourself, how did I show up this week? What was hard? What was easier than expected? Write down your answers if possible. This reflection consolidates your learning and prepares you for phase 2. Phase 2, days 8 through 14, the resistance. The second week is typically the hardest. The initial motivation has faded. The results aren't yet dramatic enough to be self-sustaining. Your old identity is fighting back. Days 8 through 10 are what I call the dip. Author Seth Godin wrote an entire book about this phenomenon. The point in any new endeavor where progress slows, difficulty increases, and quitting seems rational. Most people quit during the dip. That's what makes it so powerful if you push through. During the dip, expect your brain to generate sophisticated arguments for quitting. This isn't really working. Maybe I need a different approach. I'll start again when things calm down. These thoughts are not insights. They are resistance. They are your old identity fighting for survival. Your strategy during the dip: lower the bar, but don't remove it. If the full protocol feels impossible, do the 3-minute emergency protocol. If even that feels impossible, do 1 physiological sigh, say your identity word, and do 10 seconds of movement. Something, anything. Just don't let the chain break. Days 11 through 14 often bring a shift. If you've made it through the dip, something changes. The resistance doesn't disappear, but it weakens. The protocol starts to feel less like an imposition and more like a choice. You may notice that skipping feels worse than doing it, a sign that your identity is beginning to shift. At the end of week 2, reflect again. Ask yourself, what tried to stop me this week? How did I respond? What does it mean that I'm still here? Celebrate the fact that you made it through the dip. Most people don't. Phase 3, days 15 through 21, the integration. The third week is about consolidation. The habit is forming. The identity is solidifying. Your job now is to lock it in. Days 15 through 17 are for optimization. Now that the basic pattern is established, you can start fine-tuning. Which elements of the protocol feel most impactful? Which could use adjustment? This is the time to personalize, not to reduce or skip, but to make the protocol more fully yours. Days 18 through 20 are for stress testing. Deliberately notice how you handle disruptions. If a morning goes sideways, observe how you respond. Are you adapting with the emergency protocol, or are you catastrophizing? Use these observations to strengthen your resilience. Day 21 is a milestone, not a finish line. When you reach day 21, take time to acknowledge what you've accomplished. You've done something that most people never do. You've maintained a new practice for 3 full weeks. You've built a foundation. You've begun the identity shift. But here's what I need you to understand. Day 21 is not the end. It's the beginning. The challenge gets you started. The rest of your life is where the compound effect happens. What to expect along the way? Let me give you some realistic expectations based on hundreds of people who have completed this challenge. Days 1 through 3, high motivation, moderate execution. Most people feel excited and execute well. Days 4 through 6, declining motivation, variable execution. The first real tests appear. Some days feel harder than others. Days 7 through 10, low motivation, tested execution. This is the dip. The challenge feels real. Doubt creeps in. This is where most people quit. Days 11 through 14, stabilizing motivation, improving execution. If you make it through the dip, things get easier. The protocol starts to feel more natural. Days 15 through 18, returning motivation, consistent execution. Results become more noticeable. The identity shift accelerates. Days 19 through 21, established motivation, automatic execution. The protocol no longer feels like something you have to do. It starts to feel like something you get to do. Your experience may vary. These are patterns, not guarantees. But knowing what typically happens helps you interpret your own experience. When day 8 feels impossible, you'll know, this is the dip. This is normal. This is where I prove who I'm becoming. 1 year from now, I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Take a breath. And let me paint a picture of where you could be 1 year from now if you follow through on this challenge. It's 365 days from today. You've executed the unstoppable morning protocol in full or compressed form on over 300 of those days. Not perfect, but consistent. Relentlessly, adaptively consistent. What's different? Your mornings are no longer something that happens to you. There's something you create. The alarm goes off and your body responds automatically, not with resistance, but with readiness. The old negotiations, the snooze battles, the groggy scrolling, they're distant memories. Your morning is yours. Your energy has transformed. You no longer drag through the first hours of your day. You launch. The brain fog that used to cloud your thinking until noon has lifted. You do your best work in the morning because you've learned to protect and optimize that time. Your productivity has compounded. Those first focus hours, protected day after day, have produced results that seemed impossible a year ago. Projects completed, goals achieved, progress made. Not through heroic effort on single days, but through consistent effort across hundreds of days. Your identity has shifted. You no longer see yourself as someone who isn't a morning person or struggles with discipline. You see yourself as someone who shows up, someone who owns their day, someone who is, in the most literal sense, unstoppable. And here's what might surprise you most. It wasn't that hard. Not because the challenge was easy, it wasn't, but because the compound effect worked in your favor. Each day built on the previous day. Each week strengthened the next week. The person who executes the protocol on day 365 isn't struggling like the person on day 3. They're flowing. They've become someone for whom this is simply natural. This future is available to you. Not guaranteed. Nothing is guaranteed. But available. Waiting. Ready to be claimed by anyone willing to show up for 21 days and then keep showing up after that. Your commitment. I'm going to ask you to do something right now. Before you finish this audiobook, I want you to make a commitment. Say these words out loud. Or if you can't speak aloud, say them in your mind with full intention. Tomorrow morning, I begin the 21-day Unstoppable Challenge. For the next 21 days, I will execute the Unstoppable Morning Protocol in some form, full or compressed, every single day. I will not negotiate with excuses. I will not wait for perfect conditions. I will show up, adapt when necessary, and never miss twice. This is who I'm becoming. This is what I do. I am unstoppable. Did you say it? Did you feel it? That commitment, spoken with intention, is the first step. Tomorrow morning is the second step. And every morning after that is another step on a journey that has no finish line, only forward progress. Final words. I want to leave you with something personal. I created this audiobook because I believe something about you. I believe you're capable of more than you're currently expressing. I believe your mornings have been stolen from you by algorithms, by habits, by a culture that profits from your distraction. And I believe you can take them back. The Unstoppable Morning Protocol isn't complicated. It doesn't require special equipment or exceptional willpower or hours of extra time. It requires 10 minutes and a decision. A decision to stop letting your mornings happen to you. A decision to start creating them with intention. Every concept in this audiobook was chosen because it works. Every protocol was designed because it produces results. Every word was crafted to move you from where you are to where you want to be. But I can't do the work for you. I can give you the map. I can show you the path. I can even walk beside you in spirit through these chapters. But when that alarm goes off tomorrow morning, you're the only one who can choose to rise. So here's my final question for you. 1 year from now, will you look back at this moment as the turning point? Will you remember this audiobook as the thing that finally made the difference? Will you be living proof that ordinary people can become unstoppable through the simple practice of owning their mornings? Or will this be another good idea that faded? Another audiobook that inspired you for a day and then gathered digital dust? Another almost that joins the collection of things you meant to do but never quite did? The choice is yours. It's always been yours. Tomorrow morning, when that alarm goes off, you will make a decision. And that decision, repeated across days and weeks and months, will determine who you become. I believe you're going to show up. I believe you're going to push through the dip. I believe you're going to become the person who doesn't just know about unstoppable mornings, but lives them. Prove me right. Your alarm will ring tomorrow. Your life is waiting. Rise. Epilogue. Your first morning starts now. You've reached the end of this audiobook, but you're standing at the beginning of something far more important. You now have everything you need. The science behind why most people sabotage their mornings. The 5-step Unstoppable Morning Protocol. Reset, prime, activate, focus, launch. The 3-minute emergency protocol for the days when life attacks. The 21-day challenge that transforms knowledge into identity. All of this is yours now. But knowledge that isn't applied is worthless. And every morning you don't use what you've learned, you'll feel the gap between who you are and who you could be. Let me tell you exactly what to do. Tonight, before you sleep, set your alarm. Place your phone across the room. Decide on your 2-minute win for tomorrow. And say out loud, tomorrow morning, I begin. Tomorrow morning, when the alarm sounds, do not snooze. Do not grab your phone. Take 6 physiological sighs while still in bed. Get up and expose yourself to light. Speak your 3-word mantra. Identify your MIT. Execute the 2-minute energy ignition. Complete your 2-minute win. Then launch into your most important work. That's day 1. Then do it again on day 2. And day 3. Keep going. Full protocol when you can, emergency protocol when you must, until showing up becomes who you are. Here's my final promise. If you show up for 21 days, you will not be the same person. Your mornings will be different. Your energy will be different. Your entire life will be different, not because of magic, because of the relentless power of showing up. Tomorrow morning, when that alarm goes off, you have a choice. The snooze button and the familiar fog of another lost morning. Or rising, resetting, priming, activating, focusing, launching, proving that you are capable of more. The alarm will ring tomorrow. Choose to be unstoppable, that I'll see you on the other side.